Welcome, Jared. Nice to have you sit down with me today and get to know you. We met at the New Media Summit, and I'm speaking with Jared Castillo. Did I say that right? Castillo or
Yes,
Castillo?
accurate.
Okay, Castillo. And you are a youth performance coach, very distinctive and extremely helpful to so many people. So you really captured me with what you do.
Thank you.
So welcome. Anyway, I'd like to find out how's your day going first of all, and where are you located?
Yeah, so first and foremost, good morning. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to sit down, so to speak, and have this interview. I'm super excited, and I am reporting from Orlando, Florida, right now. More specifically, Winter Garden. It's a lovely, muggy day out, but we're not going to let that keep us down.
I love muggy. I love humidity. I know it sounds odd, but it just I love the moisture in the air. I think it's so healthy feeling to me.
I swear, you're like one of few people. I resonate with that. I agree with that. You're one of few people who ever say that. Everyone's like, "Oh no, Florida has awful humidity." And I just got back from like the west side, like in California, all the way to Texas. I'm like, man, it's dry stuff. I don't like it.
Yeah. I know. I am in the minority with that thinking. I know people just look at me different that way, but anyway, awesome. That sounds great to me. And so, Jared, can you do youth performance coaching, and
hmm
it's a life coaching for what age group? What do you call youth?
So essentially, the easiest way to describe it would be, in essence, life coaching. That would be the simplest way to kind of like dumb it down. But in terms of the age range, I've been, based off of feedback, I've found that I will probably be working with anyone, generally speaking, from the age of like 12, middle school age to high school. However, I have found that I've had college students and students right outside of college as well who I've also worked with. So, ultimately it comes down to what people need of me. But I, generally speaking, might say that I speak to most specifically the middle school to high school range and high school heading into college.
Okay, that's really good. That's really helpful to everyone reading and listening to this blog. Now, there's something that you have developed, and it's about a wolf. I wonder, first of all, before we go into that, though, I've got to find out what inspired you to, in the wolf, that the animal wolf. What is the wolf to
hmm
you? What does it mean to you? What does it symbolize to you?
Got it. So I'm wondering how to answer this without. Do you want the long version or the short version?
I, I, it could be the long version. We've got some time. Yeah, we've got some
We
time.
set the time. So it was a couple of things. I'll go ahead and start with the beginning, so to speak. I don't really know what exactly it was, but I remember when I started like doing research into various realms, and one of them kind of being in kind of like exploring different things in form of like spirituality. I found this whole concept that we've heard before of like spirit animals, and like the whole thing with resonating with your birthday and stuff like that. And for some reason, I had just always immediately said, "Oh, like my spirit animal is a wolf." And someone said, "Well, you can't do that. You can't just like, choose it." I was like, "Well, I choose it anyways." And ultimately, it was just like, yeah, like that's what I chose the wolf. And then I ended up getting, and I'm in my room right now, and I'm actually looking at a tapestry with a wolf howling inside of a moon. There's like a moon and a wolf inside of it. It's like this mosaic type thing, and then next to it, my sister colored this painting of a wolf for me as well. And it's just kind of something that I took and I ran with. And then I started to get further into my journey, and the coaching program that I'm a part of, they started talking about like how it is that I wanted to express this innermost calling, so to speak, that I want to essentially model. And in another word, it might be like, how do you want to brand or market yourself? But beyond that, before I even got into that, like I remember having this conversation with my dad where he was like, "What is your fascination with wolves?" And I was like, honestly, like it just was something that almost like it chose me, and I automatically kind of went with it. And he said, "It's really funny when me and your mom were naming you, like we were picking your name before you were born. We went through a couple of options. So my dad's really funny, and he basically made this game out of picking my name. He said that if I can make fun of this name to my mom, he said that if I can make fun of his name, we can't pick it because my son's not going to get picked on and made fun of." So they went through a few names. One of them, the finalists were Cruz, Jared, Michael, and Wolf.
Hmm.
I didn't know that until he told me, and this was within the past like 6 months that he told me this. I didn't even know this.
Hmm.
So it was really funny. Where he ultimately said that obviously they ended up. My mom was just like, "No, we're not naming our kid Wolf," and obviously they ended up picking Jared. And it was funny. It was one of these things where a lot of like the work that I do in my own personal life, I talk about the concept of flow and fluidity, and things in like force versus flow. And then it occurred to me that my dad said this. He's like, "Oh, that's super cool. Yeah, like you can embody this like wolf thing." And he's like, "Oh, and guess what? Wolf backwards is flow." And I was like, "Holy crap!" Like my mind was blown. My mind was completely blown that wolf backwards was flow. It never even occurred to me.
Hey, never. Yeah, this is very cool. Wow, it is in your birthright practically. You the synchronicity of the wolf with
Exactly.
That,
it was there.
Yeah. So just curious, have you been one that the wolf is all a very instinctual creature and a family centered creature animal. Do you find yourself to have like characteristics in that way?
I would say yes. So your like original question and kind of tying to what does it mean to you?
Yeah.
I think that lines up perfectly because that next piece when it kind of like hit me was when I started asking myself what is the wolf? What does it stand for? And I was like, okay, well the wolf is multifaceted. In one instance, you hear about the lone wolf that it goes off and it does its, so to speak, its own work. And the way I describe that is the wolf being in that lone wolf state is like going and doing that inner work. When you have to be alone, when you have to go and do the things that you need to do in order to make sure that you are full, like to have your cup full, to make sure that your belly is full, so then you can go out and you can serve. And then the other side of that is it's also a pack animal, and they'll even say in a lot of like research that I've done that they are pack animals by nature, and they work as a team, so to speak. Like they'll corner off the prey, or the what they ultimately need to take down, the prey that they're going to ultimately have to accomplish this goal, and they work as a team. They go and they get things done, and it's very much and was deeply rooted in how my family raised me and my sisters. It was all about family, and even now to this day, as my dad has his family kind of sporadic around North Carolina and Texas and stuff like that, and he's always mentioning about the importance of being close to your family. He's like, I wish that me and my siblings were closer. He's like, and you'll wish that too when you're older. So we've always had this embodied idea of keeping family close. So we're all here right now, currently in Central Florida. So I would definitely say the answer to that question is yes. Like we've always had a close knit unit, and even still in that, I'm always traveling and going places. Sometimes I go and I do that lone wolf sequence where I'm out and I'm learning, I'm experiencing, I'm growing, and I come back and ultimately I always come back to my roots of my family.
That's so cool. And now you've incorporated the wolf into your programming for your clients, and I just find the whole symbolism, the how you have worked it into the instilling of your life coaching. It's very integral to the whole process. So, do you want to talk a little bit about the WOLF?
Yes, absolutely. So it was actually the brainchild of me and my coach when she initially heard out what I was talking about and this embodiment of the wolf and like what it was and what WOLF standed for, ultimately, and I'm just going to tie something small into it, the final piece of like this coming into the wolf was this realization for me, and it goes perfectly into the process. The embodiment of the wolf for me was, in essence, and I've actually explained this to my dad, I've actually considered and probably will in the future legally change my name to that. And it's this weird thing where I had this experience of, I was essentially given everything since I was born. I was given a name, I was given a culture, I was given religion, I was given all these different things. And for a good period of my life, I was essentially just taking everything that everyone had given me and using that as the foundation for what I did. But then at some point I realized that I wasn't living my truth. And so this idea of stepping into wolf was like me being reborn. I was being reborn as wolf, and this was like the point in my life where I said, okay, I am now I'm going to manifest ultimately the reality that I'm stepping into, and I'm going to be responsible. That's really what it was. It was about me taking responsibility and not being dependent on somebody else. So out of that, the wolf process was born, and ultimately it started with this idea of, okay, like, we ultimately want to have this idea of where it is that we want to go. You can call it a goal, you can call it a mission, you can call it a vision, you can call it your dream. I always like the word dream. Really talk about this whole concept of, if only in my dreams. And like, to me, like, I really like the idea of turning, dreams into reality and, having that embodiment come into existence. So once we have this, like, even if it's, rough idea, I wouldn't get too caught up in the wording of it, just having this rough idea of, okay, this is where I want to go. The W in wolf stands for why. So now we know, we have this idea of, okay, where do I want to go? It's starting to really get to the core of the why. And the reason why was so important was just kind of some of the reading and learning that I did. And I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Simon Sinek.
No, tell me about that. How does that fit into it?
So Simon Sinek, he's absolutely brilliant. I highly recommend any of his work. He has this book. It's called Start With Why. And the original origin of me actually finding his work was in this video where he was talking about essentially this millennial generation, upcoming generations. And in short, what my biggest takeaways were from his words, and he's just so powerful, he's such a powerful speaker. I definitely wanted to be in the presence of his work. He's just that powerful. But he basically started talking about how this future generation is extremely dependent upon like their self-esteem, their self-worth, their entire embodiment of who they are is very dependent upon the approval of others, and even more specifically on social media and things of that nature. There was this whole connection in neuroscience to, when we get a text or when we get a message or when we get a like or a lack of likes on social media, there is this release of dopamine, which is essentially like this like feel-good hormone that gets induced into our body, makes us feel good. And when we're constantly getting that hit, he would describe it like when you get that hit, it feels good, and you keep wanting to do those things. But when you don't, it's like everything of who we are is attached to whether or not we are being approved in that person's eye, in those people's eyes, which is really detached from reality in itself. But like listening to that video, I was like, oh man, this guy's good. And I started like going down this rabbit hole, listening to his stuff, and found out his biggest thing, his entire work, that everything he does is committed to the idea of starting with your why, which is the end of his book, a book that I've read. And he goes in details about the importance and the depth of having a good, solid why, because most like big businesses and corporations, a lot of times people work with this idea of, if you imagine like three circles, a bigger circle, a medium-sized circle inside of that one, a small one inside of that. Most people work from the outside in, which he would describe as going from what, how to why, versus going from why, how to what. And the reason why he made that such of importance and it really resonated with me is because once you really know at the core of why you're doing things, the how and the what in itself is an expression of that why. It's how you go out into the world and make that happen. But when you work from the outside in, when you go and you just do a bunch of things, there's this almost like lack of clarity on what your message actually is, and you're going and doing versus actually being.
Oh, very well done. Yeah, I completely agree. You need the why. It's the fuel that that fire that lights you up, that puts you in the forward motion to
Yeah.
to carry out, anything. I mean, you've got to know why before you almost walk out the door in the morning. Why am I walking out the
Mm-hmm.
door? It's crucial, and that's extremely powerful.
Absolutely. I mean, you're right on the nose with that one. Like, why am I walking out the door? Why am I getting up at ungodly hours? Why am I staying up late? Like these types of things,
Yeah,
right?
it's that whole checking yourself. Why you almost have to question your why throughout the day as a practice.
Yep.
Yeah, that's so cool. So there's the why of the W of wolf.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So once where I was starting is once you have this clarity of okay, and mind you, it doesn't need to be perfect again. I think that this is I'm speaking for myself, and I often believe that it's probably not just me, but I have, and I think that a lot of people. My age range specifically, and also even younger, probably even older, get really caught up in having everything perfectly worded, like this perfectionist quality comes out. So having this idea of a why, but also being open to allowing it to be refined over time and not getting stuck on it. Like none of these steps are something that it's like, oh, okay, I got to W, now I go to O, and then I go to L. Like, no, you'll constantly be going back. I just wanted to preface that.
Well, there's there's
an
evolution. It's really not. It's an evolving process that
yes.
It doesn't have to be in a sequence of order. That A before B before C, or in this case W
yep.
before O before L before F, but
mm-hmm.
they're interchangeable.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and so the O is old self, which I love. Be aware of who you are. The whole, just really looking at who you are, and you want to check yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, and I think about being my old self. Who was I then? How am I now? What improvements have I made? And my core values and beliefs. Get those in check and place. How do you coach with the old self to your clients?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. I'm assuming you've taken a peek at my website.
Yeah.
It's going to be changing soon because we're going to be kind of putting in the story a little bit of the wolf. So that's going to go from old self to old wolf. And it's ultimately it's saying the same thing, but it's just in the light of that. And like exactly like you said, and actually like the picture has, right? It's like having a peek at ourselves. And recently, one of the things I've become very fascinated by that I guess isn't like a big topic of conversation is the idea of doing shadow work. And this is interesting because I had this idea that shadow work was essentially doing work with the negative aspects of self. That's what I thought it was. But based off of like some of the research I had done, and even more specifically, like just yesterday, something came up where it made me realize that doing that old self work, that old wolf work, or that shadow self work, is actually taking a look at the things like we have our actual being presence that is, I would say, symbolic of what is conscious to us. What am I consciously aware of? And then the shadow self being what am I not conscious of, which could be something like, I get angry whenever somebody does something I don't like, even more specifically, when somebody cuts me off and I rage. That's the conscious aspect. I know that I get rageful about it. But maybe what I don't know about it is in the shadow self that there is this aspect that has not been distinguished that is hindering me from being able to actually have a transformation and just letting that wave come and go. And then the other side of the shadow self being maybe there's a part of me, like my true joy in life, that's in the shadow, and something is keeping that from being fully expressed. So, yeah, it was really weird. Like that to me was like big time. I was like, holy crap! Like there's parts of me and my shadow self that are being hidden that really need to see the light.
That's something I have not I've not have access to shadow self. So it's got a nice visual. I can visualize the shadow and I can visualize that as a term because you can see, well, there are things hiding in the shadows that either you don't see because it's so dark, or you keep hiding them because
Yes.
there could be perhaps some insecurities or some emotional side to things that you just don't want to bring up, and
Yes.
you want to hold them there. That's extremely helpful to visualize that picture of the shadow self. I like that a lot. Who was
Yeah.
who was the person that you learned that from? Again,
So this is actually based off of work of I'm sure you might have heard the names Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud.
oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, they did work together, and they basically talked about this idea of the shadow self, which that's entirely what at least what I consider to be like a lot of what like psychoanalyzing is, and
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. Like we talk about the aspects of self that are not aware or not brought into our conscious awareness, and then the shadow kind of being significant or resonant of the subconscious or unconscious aspects of self.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I work with youth, I'm not necessarily going to claim I'm going as deep as Freud or Jung, but we start to just distinguish like what are the things that we know aren't serving us at least. Like what do we know right now? Of course, I can see things. Like it's very easy for us to look at someone else and be like, oh, I see that, and however we go about it, whether we say, oh, I don't like that, or oh, I see that in myself. That's how I try to see more than anything now. Is if I see something outside of myself I don't like, so to speak, then that actually exists inside of me. So it's really easy for me to look at you and to say, I don't like how you reacted to that person, but now I look back and I say, oh, that obviously exists inside of me, so let me look at that.
Yeah.
So in a way, I try to hold a mirror up to the people that I'm working with and say, well, like what isn't serving you. For example, if and a lot of it having to do in the realm of like self-worth and things like that, and believing in one's own ability. It's okay. Well, like is that do you want to keep that? You see that it's not serving you. Like, do you want to keep this? And just like I said, like looking at those aspects and features of self that aren't serving us, and maybe even shedding light or providing questions that they themselves can bring themselves into spreading that light or awareness on aspects aren't serving them. So then once we know, in my opinion, any real transformation, the first step before you can do anything about it is to know, is to have awareness, to shed the light.
I completely agree. Yeah, so you're shedding the light on some of those shadow areas of themselves, and is there an aha moment that occurs with when you do that with your clients? Like, oh my gosh, it never occurred to me. I didn't see it. Anything that comes out like that?
I would say that with the people that I have worked with, most of the time, I'm going to say yes. And I really do try to hold this idea that I'm a mirror. I'm not giving them the answers. I'm merely providing a mirror so they can see the answers for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it's really more empowering. It's one thing if I give you the answer. It's another thing if you get the answer for yourself.
Yeah.
And you see that, like, oh, snap. I've been being a butthole to my parents this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
That's not cool. And, then it becomes this thing. Like, I myself and also people I work with just have these, like, huge emotional releases because we have this, like, realization, this awareness, like, oh, my goodness. Mm-hmm. I never saw it like that. I never saw it in that light.
And then they see, yes. And then they see, oh, I see I have this behavior, and then what is the cause of that behavior? And then you can track backwards to find out. I react to my parents in this way when, if something happens that, and I strongly react, it's a trigger for me, but okay, now looking at that helps my shadow self go take a few steps backward and find out, okay, so what is it that is so sensitive in that spot right there? And there begins the work.
Absolutely. Once you see it, I think that once you've seen that shadow, or once you've seen that aspect, there's ultimately there's choices that come after that. Like one of them's like, oh, okay, screw it. I don't need to worry about that. Like I'll just let that be. Now we might not say that as much, but that whole like idea of like sweeping it under the rug,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I think that the next step after awareness, I truly believe it's taking responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
once I know that that's happening, it's like, okay, I need to take responsibility for that
That's where the
and
L
make a
comes
choice.
in, I think, right, Jared?
What was that?
Where you take the leap into the responsibility piece to the transformation.
Am I taking belief into it?
The leap. So if
Oh, yes.
yeah,
Sorry. Okay,
I was
belief.
following the WOLF, and it sounded
Yes,
to me
yes.
like we had gotten to the point now. Okay, if there's awareness, we know that this behavior occurs. Now, taking the responsibility is the leap into owning up to that and making that change.
Yeah, so the way that I describe leap, I think that like responsibility is almost like this. Okay, I've seen it now. I need to take responsibility for it. The way that I relate leap is it's this responsibility leading into. I think it's like this the symbiosis of things. It is okay. I see this now. I'm taking responsibility. Now, how am I going to make this different? And the way I would describe it is now it's time to start to think about and to create, so to speak, a plan. I've seen this. I take responsibility. What am I going to do differently when I'm confronted with some kind of emotion that is triggering during an interaction, say, with my father? I see that. And normally my response is X. My response normally is to shut down and to withdraw. This is actually true to how I used to deal with interactions with my father. Instead of like fully withdrawing and just having it go in one ear and out the other, I can do these, 1 to 3 things instead. So, this is a simpler model and idea, but actively choosing, this is what I'm going to do. Here's my plan. That is mostly what leap is.
Yeah. Just a little bit aside there. Do you when you get involved, when you see these kinds of interactions with parent and teenager, do you coach them on as a together? Sometimes is it necessary to bring in the parent and say, we're going to have kind of a walkthrough on some interactions, and I'll be here. You as the coach, be there to mediate or to coach through certain interactions that you discover with your client that could be, a sort of a stunting point for their growth, and if they could get past certain fears within their relationships, that perhaps there's the growth that can take place. Have you had to go through experiences like that with your coaching?
Mm-hmm. So, may I answer that question by prefacing an opinion of mine that I believe that could be possibly pretty valuable, but also maybe contrary to what some others believe?
Sure, absolutely.
Again, may not be a popular opinion, but I do wholeheartedly believe that the child or the youth or the person who is growing up is a product of essentially how they were raised, their interactions with their parents, with their peers, with their school, and I do believe that, and this is from research I've done and from listening to like Seneca and people like that, that ultimately how we as we grow up it is a lot of times correlated with the parenting and the parenting style. So for a parent, I don't know whom this is or whom this is not, but I think that it is in that old saying, it takes a village.
Mm.
It is both the individual for the youth, but also the parents take responsibility. It's not like this, oh, okay, here's my son, here's my daughter, go and take care of them. Like, this is all their stuff. It's like, no, like there really is I believe, an extreme importance for there to be an interaction and a working together as parent and child. Because if the child is doing all the work, but their environment or their experience with their parent isn't transforming at all, it's really, really difficult to be a transformed individual in an untransformed environment.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
it completely makes sense. I did a coaching. I do my coaching is also with families, and there was an example of one youth. He was a young high school baseball star, really talented individual, and but he was a hard gainer in terms of he could not put on weight. He had what's called a he, oversensitive in terms of his tastes. He was a high taster, where if the average herb, if you eat it, yeah, it's tasty, but for him, his oral factories would explode, and he could, had to really. Not only was he a hard gainer, but he had a very, very difficult time eating anything with flavor for that reason. So I actually was coaching him specifically on what he could eat, what he could make for himself, and in order to gain weight and be healthy. Well, it did. It actually really involved the entire family. We sat down as a family, and we talked about how the family interacts in the kitchen, and the foods that they make. And then I worked solo with him, how he could empowering him in the kitchen with what he could make. And and then we came back to the family, and this is what we discovered, and it wound up being that the result was quite successful. He was eating, the family, everybody was on board, and they could go forward. And I lost track of him, but he was doing really very well when we had closed our coaching sessions. So yeah, I completely understand and agree with you, Jared, on that one.
Yeah, and it really, I do believe that I haven't had a lot of interactions, kind of like what you were asking earlier, with working both with the parent and the kid. It's usually separate, right? So like with one client I work with him, and then I'll like interact with the parent, and we'll kind of like go back and forth on things that will work, but it's never been, I think, yet to where it's been both of them together. I would be curious to see how that would go. I think that I would love to be able to get that type of work going, especially if I could end up partnering up with somebody who is who can probably more easily be understood and seen as an adult figure, because I'm still probably seen as a kid. But it's funny, I kind of like relate to myself now, and sometimes just playfully like, oh, like I'm like Uncle Jared, or like in that way. But definitely do believe that it is a group effort. I think that just like you said, like working with the actual youth themselves, and then also the parent, I think that is ultimately the way that it all comes together, versus the child thinking that they have to do it all on their own, like wanting to eat healthier, but then all they see is junk food all the time. It's like, oh, my willpower is being exerted all in the beginning of my day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, you may appear as being young for having this work that you do, but you have a old soul in you that is very wise. There's a lot of wisdom. When I saw that and felt that the day we met. So age doesn't mean anything, no matter where on the timeline of age you happen to be. It's really has more to do with who's inside. I want to finish out the WOLF before we move on. Feeding the wolf. Taking action. How do you think about that last piece to the wolf acronym?
Yeah, so we have now, like I said, we have an idea where we wanted to go. We know why we wanted to go there. We've seen ultimately what is possibly keeping us from making that change. we said, okay, I see that. I have a plan now. Now feeding the wolf is essentially going and having that new action be taken out, whatever that is. If I know that I really want to, the simpler idea is I really want to change my diet, which this is something that a lot of people go and they want to do and they try to do, and then maybe it falls off. Um, I'd say that it's okay. Well, instead of trying to jump, immediately into having a perfect diet regimen and working out 3 meals a day, 7 days a week of exactly what I'm going to eat. I'm going to go work out an hour to 2 hours every single day. I'd say that maybe it's just starting with something simple. There are some people who are ready for radical change, and maybe it comes because of a drastic need at that point in their life, and I'm like, go for that. But for some of us, myself included, like sometimes it takes a little bit of consistent effort to see those results. Like for me, like I wanted to take on doing yoga, and I was like, I want to do it every day, and then I started doing it, and then I missed a couple of days, and I got really hard on myself, and I ended up dropping it. But then I just committed to a simple 30-day yoga challenge that was only like 15 to 20 minutes a day. I saw it through to the end and also had compassion for myself whilst going through that process, because there was a couple of days where circumstances ended up arising, and instead of actually doing that specific program, I just said, you know what, I'll just do 5 to 10 minutes of stretching. I won't actually take this hiatus. I'll just, make my 30 days 34, 35 days and be more compassionate. All that to say, I digressed a little bit to say that it's, taking action. And I think from every self-help personal development book I've ever read, it's about doing it consistently. You don't need to read a book a day or 50 pages in a book a day, but if you show up and read 5 pages, you compound that over 365 days of the year, you're well over the 1,500-page mark, and that, may equate to, on average, about 5 to 6 books, which is obviously 5 or 6 books more than not having read it all.
Yeah, I think you said a couple things there that really, really resonate with me and how I coach. But one is to be super compassionate for myself and teach that to others. That compassion is extremely necessary for keeping the action in play. If you say to yourself, no, rats, I missed it today, and I'm not going to have that, hour, or I'm not going to, eat like what the perfect example of what I should be eating. Well, a variation on that, even if it's an action toward in the forward direction, however that looks, is still action. So. I completely think that the compassion side of things has really got to be internalized, because too often we dismiss one slight fault, and then it's all or nothing kind of thinking is just not serving us at all. So forward motion. Action, no matter however that looks, and it could be long, short time frame. Can be all in. It can be 1 foot in. That's okay as long as it's in the forward direction.
I think that you are spot on with that. I couldn't agree more. I would even go to the extent of saying that compassion isn't important; is that it's necessary.
Yeah, totally. That's a huge piece to, I think, why many of us are not staying in the game, for our own transformations, for carry the why and making our why into a what, and it really does stand in the way. So compassion is very, very important. So my next interest about you, Jared, is why do you do this, and what tell me about your what's your story about how you came to becoming a life coach for youths, and I want some background on you. This is I think you've got a niche here that is so incredibly important. I could almost see you training others in, you know, in your age group. I think it matters. I think the age group that you are in helps a youth to feel that you can understand, you really come from a place where they can, a true mentor. Because it wasn't, you're in your 20s, would you, or am I right on that?
Yeah, I turned 23 on the 23rd of February. It's my golden year.
Okay. All right then. So, yeah, so tell me, how did you come about becoming a life coach?
Well, that is a good story, a good long story, I would say. I will say that it's got so many facets, so I'll just start by starting. Ever since I was young, middle school, even entering the high school, I was bullied, ostracized, and kind of like left out. And it wasn't as overt as some people experience it. It was very much more covert, more like very subtle, like you don't belong type stuff. And when I got into high school, I did everything I could in my eye to fit in. I did popular sports. I joined the football team. I quickly was put down because of my height. I was too short. Derived the fact that I was one of the more talented in what I was doing. So then I ended up taking on competitive weightlifting because I was like, okay, well, if I do this, then I'll, so to speak, I'll be good enough. So I got into competitive weightlifting and ultimately dropped football and ended up sticking with competitive weightlifting. I got really good, and into my junior year, ended up starting competitive cheerleading as well. And I basically, I started to know myself as someone who was gifted in these areas. I ended up going to states in both weightlifting and also in cheerleading, getting a state ring amongst other things, and like doing very well in sports. And somewhere along that journey, I had this idea of like, oh, it would be cool to be able to share this knowledge with others. So I started like teaching, like kind of like not like I ever like formally did it, but like I started teaching and coaching people on how to lift weights and stuff like that. And ultimately, the idea was I wanted to help people, do more with their physical capacity and stuff like that. It's something I enjoyed. It was something that it like fueled me and just helped people see that within themselves. It was in its own right like this confidence booster. And after around that time, like when I graduated high school, I did just like a good boy, like I was supposed to, and I went straight into college. I started going to a local community college at Valencia, put in my 2 years AA, and around that time, in my first year heading into my second year of college, in the 2015 to 2016 year, mostly 2016, life was I was doing all the things I was supposed to be doing. I was going to school full time. I had 4 jobs at the time to try and pay my way through school. And I had a girlfriend. I was making pretty decent money. I was working out almost every single day. Ultimately, was able to graduate college with no student loan debt, being able to pay my way through it, along with the kind of like the never-ending encouragement from my parents and things like that. But was ultimately able to do all the things I was supposed to do. And, in hindsight, it all seemed great. Like, I graduated magna cum laude, honors, and, like, did all those things. I continued to excel in taking care of my body and things like that. But what people didn't know about was what was happening behind the scenes, which was that I was, working and schooling somewhere close to 60 to 70 hours a week. I had no social life. I didn't spend any time with friends. Anytime that I wasn't spent studying or schooling, I spent with my then girlfriend, whom at the time was struggling heavily with mental health related things. And ultimately, what ended up happening was I was kind of getting beat into the ground by a series of events. And to make a long story short, and within that, my parents and families on both sides started having a lot of conflict. My parents are divorced. Both sides started kind of having conflict that was rippling through our family, and I've always been the rock in between both families, the person that everybody kind of came to and like laid out all of the things that they were struggling with, and I, was always the ear for that, so I was, trying to be the rock for them, and I had some things pop up with both of my sisters that ultimately was like taking a lot of energy in kind of throwing into the mix with our family, which was also very difficult. And then amongst that, I gotten into I basically had an accident where I like destroyed my ankle, which knocked me out of walking for about 9 months, which, obviously I wasn't working out around that time. And that was how I took care of myself. Like going and working out and moving my body was how I took care of myself. So like that kind of like really put a damp on my mood. I recovered from that. And then all of a sudden, like everything all at once decided it was going to explode. And that was when the peak of everything that was happening in my family exploded in my face. My experiences at work were becoming very unwanted and very unliked because I was showing up, I was doing work, and then I was getting like simple things about like how I needed to cut my hair off and like do all these little things that were like really nagging at me. And then amongst that, I was with a friend of mine whom 5 minutes later, I was with my girlfriend and with a friend. 5 minutes later, drove up the road and got into a terrible car accident and ended up passing away. And then had to kind of like deal with all of the emotions of that with my girlfriend and things like that. And then also shortly after that had gotten in on the same road where my friend passed away, got into a horrible accident with my girlfriend where it totaled my car. It really messed her up. It cracked my ribs, and I had all of that I needed to deal with. And it was really just becoming more and more difficult because she was becoming increasingly she was really struggling, and I was trying to be there to support her, and I was trying to work my jobs, and I was trying to go to school, and I was trying to take care of myself, but it all just became too much. It got to the point where I realized that I was completely numbed out to the world. I didn't feel anything emotionally and very little physically. I wasn't able to work out. I wasn't able to do anything for me, and it truly left me questioning my life. I cut off my relationship with the relationship ended between me and my partner. I quit all of my jobs.
All four of them.
All four of them. The only thing that I did stick with during that time was school, and it was very fortunate because I was an online student, so I didn't have to go anywhere. So ultimately what ended up happening, which very few people knew about, was that I stayed in my room suffering in silence in a dark room, and I was numbing myself, my way of dealing with my pain when I was in middle school and in high school when I didn't have friends, so to speak, and that those interactions that I wanted to have was I numbed myself with video games. I played a lot of video games. I mean, an unreasonable amount of video games. And it was, in hindsight now, old self, I can see that was a numbing technique. Instead of dealing with reality, which was obviously blowing up in front of me, I numbed and I played a lot of video games. I didn't do the work, and I just got in a really, really, really deep hole. I continued doing the schoolwork and stuff like that, but I didn't work like I have a regular job for almost 2 years after that, I think. And I was very fortunate that I had accrued so much money from working so much that I was able to kind of support myself through that. But it hit this like all-time low when I thought I was starting to do the work, and I was in a relationship then, and it occurred to me that my gas tank had been on E for so long, and I had been in the same environment for so long, and nothing was changing for so long that it was slowly starting to drive me insane.
Yeah.
Obviously,
yeah.
I was struggling with depression heavily. I was struggling with anxiety heavily, and I truly felt like I was, again, it's really funny, I was doing all the things that I was told I was supposed to do. And this idea, like, oh, if you do all these things, go to school, get good grades, get a good job, and it's like, oh, you'll be happy. All right, well, I'm going to, for the sake of not, being too French, like, I call BS. So it got to that point, and it just so happened that it was summertime, I believe, of 2017, because it kind of dragged out through 2016, this entire incident. Uh, and it was summer 2017. I was like, I need to change of scenery. So like, I just had this epiphany of going online and looking up summer camp jobs out of state, and I found some in I think it was New Jersey, and was like, oh, like that'd be cool or whatever. And that was like, those are the ones that immediately available to me. But then I had this like epiphany. I was like, wait a second, I've always wanted to go to California. Let me see if there's any in California.
Mm-hmm.
And long story short, I found a ungodly amount of camps in California. I applied to like 20 locations within 3 hours. Heard back from 5 or 6 of them within the next 24 hours. And basically within 3 days from the time that I applied to the time that I was leaving, I interviewed with 3 different people, interviewed twice with one, got background checked, booked a flight, canceled a flight, enrolled my best friend, booked a flight, canceled a flight, got in a car, and drove to California in 3 days.
Man. If there's one thing about you, Jared, you are a man of action. There's no question about it. I mean, even going back to, I'm trying to just visualize how I would do with 4 jobs, full-time student, girlfriend, and working out every day. Blows my mind. Clearly, that's not a sustainable lifestyle, but what it also shows to me is just how you are a man of action as well. And you just had to temper that a little bit. But yeah, that's unfortunate you had those accidents. But a lot of times when you're in this state of trying to accomplish more than human beings probably should accomplish at any one time, then there's going to be a little bit of you're accident prone. Basically, it's kind of like I think about it when you'll notice. You probably noticed this, but professional basketball players, they toward the end of the season, when it's really ramping up and they're traveling, they're working out, they've got one game after another, you'll notice a lot more injuries occur. Things. It's just it's grueling, a grueling schedule physically. And mentally too. So yeah, wow, that is quite a story. You have really accomplished so much, but it's such a learning process, and the really huge piece I see in all that is you took a lot of life experiences and turned them around into learning. What can I learn from this, and how can I readjust and look at myself, recalibrate, and move my action plan is going to be a little now just calibrated a little different going forward. You have been through this process yourself, and now you're refining and evolving. It's pretty cool to hear about that.
Yeah, and you're spot on with that. I mean, ultimately, that was how the process was born. Like, having gotten to California, I ended up working at that camp with kids and adults with special needs for about 3 months. Got my basically like revived. I like came back to life, and then from that, I was like, holy cow! Like, if you don't mind, if I share like another quick little bit from that.
Yes, do it. Yeah.
This was like the final bit of the story, and it all kind of ties in together. But like even while I was there in California, I was like struggling a lot because I was working, and a lot of things. Again, I think we're sure you can attest to it. Like when it rains, it pours. Life happened again where I was struggling with work. I had a lot of people like talking behind I had this one specific person was like really talking about me behind my back, and like people started like picking on me at work what they didn't know was that and it happens is when I get really, really stressed out, I start to withdraw, and I was starting to withdraw a little bit in my work, but nobody took the time to ask me why. And ultimately, what ended up happening was within about a 2-week span, my grandfather passed away. I went through a pretty awful breakup. I had another horrible accident happen where I messed up my ankle pretty bad, and then
for a second time. That was the second.
Yes.
Wow.
The opposite ankle.
Oh.
So the final straw, mind you, through this. I mentioned my friend passing away. This was not just a friend. Like, I got a call from a friend of mine, and this was my oldest friend. My friend, when I was 5 years old, calls me, and when I moved to Orlando, when I was 5 years old, my two best friends were these two people. The one who called me, and then the one that he called me and said, "Hey, like, I'm sorry, but like, he passed away." And in that moment, and this had happened, the same thing happened when the accident occurred and my friend passed away. I did not cry. And I'm like thinking, why can't I cry? Why can't I cry? And like, all I could say in that moment was, dude, I'm so sorry. It was almost like I was like completely numbed out to it. I was numbed out to it. Nothing was hitting me. Like, nothing was able to, like, even the thing with my grandfather and everything else, like, nothing was coming to hit me. But then, like, the final straw of that 2 weeks towards the end of camp, I got a text from my ex-girlfriend saying, "Hey, I'm so sorry about Hulk." And I'm just like, "What are you talking about? Hulk is my, I had taken Hulk or my two dogs at home," and I called my stepmom. She's like, "Hey, what's up?" And I said, what happened to Hulk? And immediately she went from bubbly to sobbing, crying, saying, "You weren't supposed to find out." And essentially I came to find out that he had something go wrong with his internals and he passed away. And he was like my little buddy, and that was like the final straw. And in that moment, I remember being outside and like the cry of like at least 2 full years just hit me. And I'm like boo-hooing, sobbing, like tears streaming down my face, snot running down my face, like that cry, like you just got broke up with right before prom. Like that type of crap. And it just like, I cried for a good 15 minutes straight. And after that happened, I had this just like moments, this experience of full-blown openness. I never felt so clear my entire life. It's like the emotions of 2 years all went through me at one time, all got out, and then I just felt like freed up. And it was like, I think in that moment or in that experience when I realized that I had been going through like so numb, so zombie, so just tired out, and I couldn't do it anymore. And just like what you said, like I knew that when I was in my states of going, like I was essentially doing this work unknowingly. But the piece that was missing, the piece that, and I'm even now doing this work, is I've had emotional suppression and numbness for years without even knowing it. And that is why I think that final piece of the puzzle, so to speak, that old self to me was one of the most important. Like, it's not the stuff that you know that hurts you the most, the stuff that you don't know that hurts you the most, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And that was where this process, I believe, was birthed.
Yeah, that release just of all that pain, it was sitting in there. You know, there's the stress that we put upon ourselves. It's inside of our entire nervous system. Our nervous system is picking that is carrying that load. We aren't always aware of it either, but it's at a pivotal time. When, like, the moment when you heard about Hulk, there's always a trigger like that. It's gonna you can only put the Jenga, take as many Jenga pieces out of the blocks off the tower before it's finally going to crumble. And our nervous system, can only hold so much before it's going to have to release that. And then the strength comes back, and then you feel, like, oh my gosh, I'm just like, you could fly suddenly.
Yeah, you are spot on. I've heard about this idea of like, we have like a GPS, a global positioning system. And then I've also heard of something similar being like in relation to our emotions, like an emotional guidance system. And for me, I do believe that my emotional guidance system, probably not just me, our emotional guidance system is off. And just like you said, like with that Jenga thing, it's like it gets to a certain point where you pull too many blocks.
Mm-hmm.
You've had way too many things occur before you've actually had that release. At least for me, and I'm sure people who have similar experiences. And like any time that I find I have an emotional release, almost every single time, like I have this like clarity. Something comes up, some aspect of self that I've been holding on to, or something that's been no longer serving me comes up. I deal with it, and then I just have. It's almost like a piece of the puzzle comes back.
Yeah, yeah, that's so cool. And it's we have to recognize when we are telling ourselves, we're not keeping the compassion piece for ourselves. That is, we're internalizing that in our nervous system as well, and
Yeah.
that is manifested in negative behavior, or you're not progressing the way you'd like. You're not going forward or evolving the way you'd like to. If we are in a situation where it's a relationship situation that is unhealthy, that is inside and being absorbed in our nervous system as well. And again, all these things, we may put up with it, and we may say, "Oh, I'm dealing with it," but there will be a moment in time where that it'll all crumble. The Jenga tower will fall, and we're going to have to put it back together again, but in a better way, a stronger way, and recognize those outside forces and how they affect us, and surround ourselves with a better relationship, the people that are supportive and encouraging, those that nurture are what we have to recognize, and that's and also our lifestyle has to nurture us as well.
Yes.
I'm gonna change it up a little bit here, but one thing I have to ask you also is, I mean, you have come through some pretty serious physical, um, uh, injuries, and
Mm-hmm.
but you are very fit. You're also doing flips at the New Media Summit, and so tell me, can you talk a little bit about your how you came out of that, and how you maintain your current, physical body, and what are your practices to keep yourself fit?
Well, I would say that fitness in itself is comprised, and I know I'm not the first person to say this for sure, but I do